What is it exactly that makes a quarterback elite? Is it their arm? Is it their accuracy? Is it their achievements on the field? Over the years, from Mahomes to Brady, even back as far as Johnny Unitas, the definition and criteria of what an elite quarterback is has changed drastically throughout the years, yet there's been one constant in the debates of what exactly makes an elite quarterback, and that is your ability to win on the field in big moments. And despite all the names I just mentioned, in this video, we're going to talk about one guy who has somehow been in the conversation of elite quarterbacks, despite not really fitting the mold of what an elite quarterback is, except for that one characteristic that I just mentioned, and that is winning in big moments. In this video, we are going to talk about likely the most average amongst the elite quarterbacks in NFL history, and his name is Joe Flacco. We're going to try to explain why exactly Joe Flacco is probably not only the most average elite quarterback in history, but is probably the perfect embodiment of the most average quarterback in NFL history. And before you come at me in the comments section, I am a die-hard Ravens fan, and Joe Flacco might be my favorite player of all time. We're going to talk about it right here in this video. I'm Omer Q for Real Take Sports. Be sure to smash that thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you get notified whenever a new video is released. All right, let's dive right in and talk about it. Joe Flacco, the pride of the University of Delaware, was not necessarily the most touted prospect coming into the 2008 NFL Draft. That honor went to Matt Ryan, who was the consensus best quarterback in the draft that year, and had it not been for the Miami Dolphins already being all in on Chad Pennington and needing an offensive lineman, he would have been the number 1 overall pick. However, Ryan ended up dropping to the number 3 overall pick in the draft to the Atlanta Falcons, which left 2 quarterbacks on the board for the very needy Baltimore Ravens at the time. One of those quarterbacks was Chad Henne, who, as we have seen throughout the past couple of years, was not exactly worthy of that first-round pick, and the other was Joe Flacco. Prior to his time at the University of Delaware, Joe Flacco actually lost his starting job at the University of Pittsburgh to Tyler Palko, who pretty much did nothing in the NFL outside of leading the Chiefs to a 2-14 record in 2011. But Flacco, after his struggles at Pitt, ends up going to Delaware, and he makes a pretty good name of himself and probably becomes one of the most consequential quarterbacks in the school's history. And this, along with a cannon of an arm that won him first place in that year's skills competition for collegiate quarterbacks, was enough to put him in the conversation of the first round of the NFL draft. Entered the Baltimore Ravens, who were really quarterback needy, as I mentioned earlier. They were coming off of a failed experiment with Kyle Bowler, the former first-round pick who just never panned out. They had the former Heisman Trophy winner Troy Smith on the roster that they were ready to go into the 2008 season as a quarterback, but they needed to have a backup in case none of that worked. And throughout their history, the Baltimore Ravens have never really invested in a quarterback in a way that they were about to with Joe Flacco. Kyle Bowler was the only quarterback they had ever picked in the first round, and considering how that turned out, you could see how a team like the Baltimore Ravens that had prioritized defense above all for their entire existence would not be disposed to try to pick a quarterback early. Yet, Joe Flacco, in a way, was the perfect quarterback for that team. They were a run-heavy offense that really needed a guy who could stretch the ball down the field on play action, and Flacco ended up being that guy. And when he was picked, it was a lot of excitement in Baltimore. There was a lot of excitement in Baltimore, I should say. And Flacco immediately fit exactly what the vibe of the city was. That being, he was just a regular guy. And when you see a regular type of Joe, an average Joe, come into Baltimore, it really helped endear him to the fans early. You combine that with a rookie season where the Baltimore Ravens improved drastically on the 5-11 year prior that ended up getting Brian Billick fired. John Harbaugh and the Baltimore Ravens finished 2008 with an 11-5 record behind a stout defense, and Joe Flacco steadying the ship at quarterback. And I want to be clear, Flacco was not exactly blowing things out of the water. It was pretty below average, I want to say. Well, give me say that about Joe Flacco. He was pretty below average in 2008. He threw 14 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, completed less than 60% of his passes, and didn't even pass for over 3,000 yards despite playing all 16 games that season. But when you consider the Baltimore Ravens offense was really dependent on the run game more so than the pass game. This is a team, by the way, that had 3 500-plus yard rushers that season in Le'Ron McClain, Willis McGahee, and Ray Rice. They didn't exactly have the most explosive weapons on the field, so it makes sense that Flacco's arm was really just used in the moments that needed it. At the end of the day, Flacco proved that he was willing and able to steady the ship. And in that postseason, Flacco and the Baltimore Ravens defied all expectations, reaching the AFC Championship game, falling one game short of the Super Bowl, losing to the rival Pittsburgh Steelers in quite heartbreaking fashion. But from then on, the standard was kind of set. Joe Flacco, over the next couple of years, continued to help lead the Baltimore Ravens to the playoffs, winning a playoff game every year. And despite not always having the best and biggest numbers, Flacco was still better than probably half the NFL. And you combine that with the fact that the Baltimore Ravens were always in the hunt. The Baltimore Ravens were always Super Bowl contenders. What are you going to do? You're going to cut that guy who just seems to be working with the team? No, you're going to keep him and try to see if it's real. And in 2011, this is when things changed drastically, because it was in that postseason that Joe Flacco really cemented himself amongst the top quarterbacks in the NFL. Flacco, that postseason, showed exactly what he was made of. Not only did he lead the Baltimore Ravens to a first-round bye in the playoffs, being the number 2 seed that year, but the Ravens also went to Foxborough on the road. Joe Flacco outplayed Tom Brady in that game, and had it not been for a missed field goal by Baltimore Ravens infamous legend Billy Cundiff, Ravens probably would have went to the Super Bowl that year the way they were playing. That didn't happen, though. Yet, in that offseason, Flacco did something that completely caught everyone off guard. In an interview, Flacco had said that he was an elite quarterback. And this was following a trend of quarterbacks that had done similar things, the most recent of that being Aaron Rodgers, who had basically said the same thing in the year leading up to their Super Bowl victory for the Green Bay Packers in 2010. So Joe Flacco not only played out, but then he proceeded to talk that talk and say that he is an elite quarterback. And it's really not hard to think about why Flacco would do this. I mean, the justification is if you are a quarterback in the NFL and a starting quarterback at that, you want to think of yourself as one of the best or even the best. That is the mentality you have to compete at that level. And in a way, that's probably why everything that happened next happened, because 2012 was a monster year for the Baltimore Ravens. They went 10-6 in the regular season and then went on to beat Andrew Luck and the Indianapolis Colts in the wild card round, went on the road in both Denver and Foxborough, beating Peyton Manning in a double overtime thriller and following it up with a thrashing of the New England Patriots in the AFC title game to finally get them to the Super Bowl. And along the way, Joe Flacco was breaking records. Going into the Super Bowl that year, he had 8 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, becoming one of 3 quarterbacks at that time to have that stat going into the game of games. And in that game, Flacco balled out as he has done the entire postseason up until that point. Flacco threw 3 touchdowns, threw for over 300 yards, and led the Baltimore Ravens to a Super Bowl victory, only their second in franchise history, and really cemented himself as the best quarterback in that franchise's short but also illustrious history. And given that, the Baltimore Ravens gave the reigning Super Bowl MVP a monster contract. He ended up becoming the highest paid quarterback in NFL history at the time, and it was set. Joe Flacco was the most elite quarterback in the history of the NFL, and nothing else happened after that. Nothing. I'm lying. A lot happened after that. Following the 2012 season, the Baltimore Ravens experienced a downturn that no one really saw coming. Joe Flacco and his numbers dipped, throwing 19 touchdowns to 22 interceptions and not making the playoffs in the following year. And despite having arguably his best season under offensive coordinator Gary Kubiak in 2014, making the playoffs and losing in the divisional round, they went on to not make the playoffs in 2015, 2016, and 2017. And along the way, Joe Flacco's numbers weren't exactly spectacular, but he wasn't playing bad enough that the Ravens were in a position to bench him. Yet, in the offseason of 2018, that is when things really shook up in Baltimore. John Harbaugh came to Joe Flacco and basically told him that they were going to draft a quarterback and they were likely going to move on from him eventually. And they did that in drafting Lamar Jackson, a move that I think any Ravens fan would agree was the right move for the Baltimore Ravens to do. They not only got a guy who is as committed to bringing a Super Bowl to Baltimore as anyone has ever been, but he also got probably the most talented player in the NFL today in Lamar Jackson. But the question was, where would that leave Joe Flacco? Joe Flacco at this point had won a Super Bowl, but had proven himself throughout his career to be pretty much just the most average quarterback ever. And if you look at what happened next, Flacco goes to the New York Jets, starts a couple of games that year, then moves on to the Eagles, then it comes back to the Jets, and then Joe Flacco does something very interesting. In the 2023 season, Joe Flacco joined the Cleveland Browns, and the Cleveland Browns were still in the midst of the Deshaun Watson experiment, which was giving them pretty diminishing returns, but Flacco came in after Watson went down with an injury to steady the ship, but not only steadied it, did the most Joe Flacco thing you could possibly do. He took that ball and he just threw it every single down as far as he could. And it somehow, some way led to them having a 5-1 record under Flacco, leading the Browns to their first postseason ever since they departed from Baker Mayfield a couple of years prior. And Joe Flacco was actually being crowned as the comeback player of the year, which shows you exactly the depths that Joe Flacco actually sunk to in the prior years. My point is, if anything is symbolic of why Joe Flacco is most definitely the most average quarterback in NFL history, it's that. Flacco's average, his heights are very high, his lows are very low, but that average is right dead center in the middle. If you look at his career stats right now, Flacco boasts 257 touchdowns to 162 interceptions, 45,697 yards, and a 84.4 passer rating. I don't know about you, but that screams average to me. And I want to be clear about this. I really do mean this in an endearing way. For Joe Flacco to still be doing this at nearly 40 years old and at the level that he's doing it and really not show any chance of slowing down, it's a testament to the player that he is. His highs are very high, his lows can be very low, but if you stick around long enough, that Joe Flacco experience is going to be probably just enough to win you a couple of games. And in the NFL, a lot of times that's what people are looking for. And when I think about Joe Flacco as a Ravens fan, I not only think about probably my favorite player ever. I not only think about all of the great moments, some of the bad ones with him throwing like picks right to the other team that I've never seen a quarterback make. But despite all of that, I really do think about how I don't think there's been a quarterback like him in the history of the league, because he has found a way to stay relevant. He has found a way to stay in the game, and he's found a way to stay winning up until now. And we don't know where he's going to play at this point in 2024. It could be with the Cleveland Browns again, as they're looking for another quarterback. Could be with the New York Giants. But at the end of the day, I promise you this. If Joe Flacco starts more than 3 games, a frenzy will ensue. That is the enigma of the Joe Flacco experience. That is the experience itself. And that's probably why Joe Flacco is the most average quarterback in NFL history. Love you, Joe. Guys, let me know in the comment section what you guys thought of this. Is Joe Flacco indeed the most average, elite, whatever quarterback in history? Let me know in the comment section. Also, be sure to smash that thumbs up like there's no tomorrow. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you get notified whenever a new video is released. I'm Omer Q for Real Take Sports. Be happy, be healthy, and as always, keep it real.